and I'm in a big conference room because the smaller rooms are unavailable. However, that's okay. I'm just trying to make sure I can be seen. Okay. I'm gonna take the glasses off because they can be very distracting to me with the reflection and stuff when I am talking about books. Today we're gonna talk about 10 of my favorite historical fictions. Now, all of these are either 4 or 5 star, and they are books that set with me. Some of them, I remember how it made me feel. Some of them, I remember what happened in the book. But some of them I read so long ago that it's like kind of vague. So I had to go and check my Goodreads review to make sure that I remember what I'm talking about. So I owned a couple of these books at first, and then I recently went on Thrift Book and bought the books because I was like, these are like your favorite nonfictions, and I want to start collecting books that are my favorite. And this doesn't happen often, and this is probably my favorite nonfictions that I've read since 2017. So these are a solid top 10, but I think I bought like 12 books. So let me count. I want to make sure that I talk about 10 of them because there was like 2 of them that I was like, this could be it. This could be it. But I was going back and forth on 2 sets of books because they are by the same author. So I'll tell you about that in a second here. Also, people like to review books and talk about like, I don't want to rate them, they're not in any order. I'm going to try to put this in like my favorite order for you to understand like how impactful these books were for me. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I have 12 books in front of me. The issue I'm having is these 2 books. So Lisa C. is one of my favorite nonfiction writers, and also Percival Everett is a new favorite. So I just don't know. I literally don't know which one I should choose. So I gotta figure that out. I think even though I would just call them honorable mentions, I think I'm gonna go with The Trees. I did like The Trees a bit better, like a hair better than James. And then Shanghai Girls and The Sea of Island Women. Oh my God, I love them both very, very equally. So it's hard to choose which one. I think I'll just choose in the moment. So let me try to figure out the ordering of this and then I'll come back on. Okay, so I think I chose them. And we're gonna start from 10 to 1. Okay. I'm probably not gonna go into in-depth like very detailed reviews, but I'm definitely going to tell you what I remembered, how it made me feel, and I do have my phone here to remind me of what I wrote too. I might talk about or mention things that I wrote also in my book reviews of these books. Number 10 is the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. When this book first came out, I really truthfully wanted to read it. If you can see, because of the pages are jagged, you can't really see how much I tabbed this book, but I tabbed it a lot. It's also a very beautiful book, very beautiful cover, and Honoree did a fantastic job at writing. Like, the writing of this book is on pars with Percival Everett. I would say out of all the books that I'm going to talk about today, this book and The Trees have the best writing. The Love Song of W.E. Du Bois, it starts off with the kind of like the love story or the origin story of this family. And this family is indigenous and also of African descent. And I think how it started and how we are learning about like the tribe and how the tribe adopted the young black boy, and then how he became like enthralled and enamored by the chief's daughter and how she got pregnant, had twins, and it follows the life of the descendants of the twins and also things that happened to them throughout history. And when I say things that are happened to them around history, I'm being as light as I can because it is horrific. This is the only book in the pile that I did not rate a 4. I remember rating this book like a 3.5. And the reason why I'm sharing this book with you is because this book really touched my soul. There are parts of this book that I don't think I will ever forget. There is a character in this book who is seriously, when you think of the worst person in the world and a white man who went from town to town to town to specifically hunt down young black girls and take them in a shack in the back of the plantation and do horrific things to, it really changes you. It really brings tears to your eyes, because when I read books like this, I can't not help but to think about if my ancestors have felt this way, if my ancestors were preyed on like this. And I knew they were, right? There's stories that get passed down, but reading this was really hard. The reason why I gave it a 3.5, even though I do also think this is a must read, is because I myself, I've told you guys, I'm trying not to like keep it a secret, but I have quite a lot of sexual trauma in history. And the character that I was just telling you about, it is chapters upon chapters of explicit things that this man did to children on page, and it was too much for me. And because of that, I rated it a 3.5 because I wanted to enjoy it, but it was really hard. But there is a character, when I think right now, that comes to mind. I think her name was Aisley. I did find her to be funny and enjoyable. She's just trying to figure out her life and figure out what's going on, but the way she went about it was comical. But I love reading books that when you get to go down the whole family line, specifically when it has to do with Black and Indigenous people, and see how the world changed them, how they view different things, how different lessons and things were lost and taught. So I found this book to be a very close to true depiction on what has happened to families throughout history, especially families who have been impacted by colonization and chattel slavery here in America. So I do think that this is a must read. The biggest critique I have is just how much we got on page and so many chapters that we got on page about that awful white man and what he did to those young Black girls. The next book is a book, it's called The Last Thing You Surrender. This was actually a book that I read with my granny. Me and my granny have like a casual book club. I think it's been like a year since we've read a book together, but this was like, I think this was either our first or second book club pick. Leonard Pitts, your writing, also fantastic. I forgot to mention you when I was talking about writing that really captivated me. And also the story. This follows multiple POVs. The point of views that I think that matter the most, and also what I put in my review, is of Luther and Thelma. Luther and Thelma in this story are siblings. They unfortunately seen what happens when a white man wants something and he doesn't get it, and then he lynches your father. It's pretty much like I wanted to give that a soft cushion, but I really couldn't. And it follows the story of Luther, Thelma, their siblings, and then other people in the story. This white woman, the white woman's husband, and also a friend who has kind of like this crush on Thelma. He's a white man and he's super religious. So you follow the story of them, you follow the story of how Thelma is at this job and she is just trying to just stay Black and die. You read that a lot in literature, and you hear a lot of old folks say, all I gotta do is stay Black and die. all I got to do is stay black and die. And that is what Thelma is doing. And Luther he's angry, rightfully so. He is mad. He's upset at the world. He's upset that white people get away with atrocities and it's just like a regular Tuesday. And he was forced to be drafted because of his anger got him in trouble. And then he went to the army with the guy, the white man, who's kind of crushing on his sister. And you kind of like get more insight of how he's feeling about her, how she's feeling about him. It's kind of like a hint of a love story. I think I remember. I don't remember it going in too much depth, but just how the story was told was very beautiful. Found yourself really intrigued in Thelma's perspective because you're like, how are you okay with having this white woman live in your house and her white husband is making real threats to you? Like, you've seen what happened to your dad, and yet you are still showing compassion to a white woman. Wow, right? So you have this like love for Thelma, but I really enjoyed this book as well. So then we have The Island of Sea Women. This follows the story of two women. Most of Lisa C's novels follows the story of two women. Either they're two sisters, two friends, two whatever. The most of them that I've read, and I've read like 5 of the books, and 5 of the books that I've read of her, they really have strong female protagonists. And what I found just so awesome about this book is follow the story of Young Suk and Mia, and they are on 2 different paths in life. So Mia and Young Suk were 2 little girls who shared everything. They shared secrets, they shared things that they felt like they could only tell each other. They had a very strong bond when they were 7 years old. And as they got older, their bond just increased. One of them, I can't remember which one, don't quote me on it, but one of them was born into wealth and one of them was not. And when they got married, they realized very quickly that their husbands were treating them differently. One husband was being very loving and kind, and one was kind of like shutting her out. He may have been abusive as well. There was something very tragic that happened in this book to both of them. They were both women who were born on this Korean island called Jeju. Y'all, if I'm saying that wrong, please correct me. I don't ever want to say things wrong like that. And on this island, there are women who are trained to dive and hold their breath in the water to retrieve abalone shells. And I was so intrigued with that. I had to look it up. Like, this is real women out here. Like, this is what they do. They are phenomenal. Their breath work, crazy. So it follows the story of them doing that work and engaging in that. And also the story of how things are happening between them and their community and also their language. And I think it really shines light on a culture that we don't often talk about, which are these women who are just diving and risking their lives. They're risking their life, but the way they're risking their lives, it's an honor to it. It's beautiful. It's beautifully written. I think this was a really good book to introduce me to a culture that I was not familiar with before. And I did research some stuff after this, and I just loved what I found. So I think if you're looking for a book like that, this is the book for you. This is called Mothers. Sorry, this is a story about a Black family who lived in California. And for me, the main point of view that you got was from a young woman who was super rebellious, and she was like, I'm gonna do what I want to do. I'm gonna do it on my time, and then I'm gonna go ahead and get busy and throw it back for the pastor's son. Then it resulted in a pregnancy, and she just began to hide it and kind of like moving in sneaky ways and not telling people that, she was pregnant. But it also has perspective of her friends and including the baby's father, right? And you can tell that her actions or how she's behaving, I'm putting on my therapy cap, is because of how the adversity that she experienced and what happened to her mother. I don't want to spoil that, but what happened to her mom. So while you're reading this book, to be honest, even though there were some hard things and you are seeing how religion can really hinder how people view themselves and how they view others, and how people just can stand on this such moral high ground, this book was also very familiar and funny at times to me, because I don't know if anyone is Southern Baptist and Christian like I was raised. I'm not anymore, but I was raised that way. And just how they talked about the mothers, how they talked about the women in the church, and how the women in the church would just judge you and wear these hats and talk stuff about you and like spread rumors, and how they just could not shut up. And I was just like, I can relate to that. And just like the side eyeing that, some of the characters got, and how they would, throw it back on an elder every once in a while. Not too much, you don't want to be too disrespectful, but want to say just enough. And I just found the banter between the older generation and the younger generation to be a true depiction on what I think about when I think about Black families in the South, or Black families that are really wrapped up in Christianity, and how they can communicate with each other. Now, I'm not saying that all Christians are toxic. I'm not saying that it don't matter where you at in the U.S., that if you are in a Black community, that this is exactly how you experience things. I'm not saying that at all. But there's a very particular experience with this, of like living your life and unsure if you're doing it right, and if your community is judging you, if God is judging you. Those are just things that I kept thinking about while reading this book. And I loved this book so much. And I did rate it 5 stars. And I do think that the exploration of friendship, the aspiration of found family, I just found those themes to be really strong in this book. So if those are things that you think that you can get with, the next book we're going to talk about is The Vanishing Half. This follows a story of two twins. They are white presenting, and it follows how they both chose to live their life. One chose to marry a white man and pretend that she was not Black also. And then one was in a relationship with a Black man, and then you follow like the trials and tribulations that both of them had to experience with being married to their chosen partners, in addition to how their children received them and how they thought about their children. And what I found like very good about this book is how frustrated it made me. I know sometimes when you read a book, you're like, oh my God, if it's frustrating, I'm heading the hell out. I realized that that light was messing me up, so I hope it's not too bad right now. And I had to like change the battery. I don't know why I didn't just move the camera here. So now I feel like y'all got budgeted Bree all before, but this is where we're at, you know what I mean? So before I keep chatting, so I was looking in the book really quick, trying to find the name of the sister, but it's the Vignette Sisters. This is a good passing novel. If you ever read Passing by, I think, Neela Larson, you would enjoy this book. This book frustrated me to no return, of just how dismissive the sister who married the white man was, and how she was just willing to keep up her lie, just how she was just not trying to acknowledge anything that her daughter was saying to her. I found myself really frustrated with her, but I also love when an author can write a story or write a character in a way that infuriates me, angers me, but doesn't take me away from the story. Because that's how I feel about the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. It's just that while reading that, I had to take breaks, because I was just like, the writing is fantastic, but I keep getting taken out of the story because of my anger for that one character. And even though they're different situations, I enjoyed reading this even when I was frustrated. So this is like one of my favorite nonfictions. This is actually a nonfiction that I forced my mom to read. So I'm just really excited that I own it again. And I'm just really excited about that. I don't really know what else to say about that. Coming in hot. The next one is The Personal Librarian. Shout out to Latrice. I would have never read this book if it wasn't for you putting it in my collagen jar for my Patreon, which is like, I go in there every so often and read a book based off of patron suggestions. And this follows the story of this young woman who is also white presenting, and she is very smart. She knows Latin, she knows a couple of the languages, and her mom and her family are trying to make sure that they're able to sustain themselves. And she goes out and she finds a job to be the personal librarian to JP Morgan. So it follows the story of that woman and all the things that she did of curating and going to different places to collect these rare books for JP Morgan, while also giving you like kind of some romance themes, not directly related to JP Morgan, but kind of adjacent. But then how she explored and like went to other countries and had love interest there. What I will say is that similar to, because I read her other book recently, the author wrote another book called Harlem Rhapsody, which I thought I was going to add to this list, but I ended up giving that book a 2.5. But with this book specifically, I remember thinking like, man, there's just a lot of cheaters out here in the world, especially with this book and also Harlem Rhapsody. And I'm wondering if just cheating was at all high epidemic, or just if monogamy is just hard for people in a historical context. I don't know. It was interesting. I loved it. I loved just learning how much she cared about libraries, about collecting, about connecting to the text, about making sure that she was doing a good job. And I really appreciated that, even though there were some times and some decisions that and choices that she made with people that she may have had feelings with. And I was like, girl, we got to stand up. We got to stand fully up, our back straight. You know what I mean? Then it brings us to The Trees. And The Trees by Percival Everett really surprised me. I was not expecting, and I'm like trying to get into the camera because my arm hurt. I was not expecting to like this book as much as I did. I don't think I ever read a story where police officers at this time was Black and they were trying to figure out what's happening. The mystery of why all these bodies were coming up in this town, and why these Black, like I'm gonna say FBI agent for the lack of a better word, showed up to this town to investigate it. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. And addition, what I really loved about this book, and if you have new to my channel, I love stories that include a strong grandma, because I have a strong grandma and I love to be able to relate to the text that I'm reading. And the older Black woman in this story is really the knowledge keeper of this town. She knows everything. The way she talks about lynching, the way she talks about police brutality being a form of lynching, the way that she made sure that she recorded the death of every Black person in the country and made sure that she had people helping her in that endeavor, was just, I was in awe with her. And I was in awe with how other characters were in awe with her. They knew if information needed to be found, they knew that she was the one to go to. But I also was saddened by parts of the book where we find, folks were lying and it caused the death of Black people because white women were lying, and just how things were very Emmett Till adjacent. While reading this book, I just found myself sad and also grateful and also in awe of how this book was written. For me, this book forces you to say their name. This book forces you to come to grips with the horrid history of lynching in this country in all forms. And I found this book to be life-changing. I think the writing is beyond phenomenal, and I think you should pick this book up yesterday. So this book, Conjured Women, was one of my favorites because it also includes like healing and ancestral magic and ancestral ways of knowing as we approach like child delivering or childbirth. It follows the story of this mom and this daughter. And I remember just being so intrigued with the daughter, and her name is Rue, and how she just interacted with her mom, with the white woman who was the head of the house, and how she kind of stepped into wanting to be a reflection of her mom. I mean, nobody wants to be fully their parent, but just how she approached it, I found it to be very interesting. One of the things that really stuck with me while reading this book is just how Rue and her mom were determined to stick together. There was a scene when something happened in the water and something transformed. And I just remember listening to the book because I was doing an audio read of it. And I was just like, how did the author describe that? Like that. It's just one of those things that you're just like sitting with, right? You're just like, I can't believe I just read that. Also, this town fear of a child, I felt like was so irrational and didn't make any sense to me. In addition, I thought how this book moved back and forth in time. I think I did a video about the things that I like in books, and I want to do an upgraded version of that. One of it is when time is manipulated. It is why that is a whole section in Tulish Parish for my readathon that I do every year in October called Black Queen. I love when time is manipulated. There are some people who are like, I can't deal with time because if it doesn't make sense, I don't want to read it. To me, it does not have to make sense at all. But I love to see it. Reading this book, it felt very, not alike, not similar, but akin to Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, especially when we think about how the story would go in and out of time and things would get kind of like discombobulated. I really like that feeling when I'm reading books. You can say I'm like crazy, a little loopy, but I appreciated that. So if that is things that you're interested in, I definitely would choose to pick up this book. These are very strong characters, very strong women. They are making decisions that are, that are life and death. They're also making decisions and doing things that could potentially get them killed. The stakes are high in this book. Really get this book if you're interested. At the number two spot, I thought hard about putting this book in the number 2 spot, but this book truly, 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 truly broke me down. This is a woman who was not able to have children. This is the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. And she was born into slavery. She didn't even know her name. Her name was given to her, She ran away. She tried to figure out life. She had this beautiful person of a husband and, he died. And then she just continued to live life and kind of be like the grandma and the mother figure of those around her. There was a scene in this book that have forever stick with me, and it's just how she would talk to trees and talk about trees are alive and their beings, and they need to be respected. Just how she talked about her connection to the earth really reminded me of braiding sweetgrass. Just those aspects of it, I just felt like this was a really good historical fiction. I would read this book over and over and over if I had to. I absolutely love this book so much because it kind of feels like when I'm reading it, like my grandma is telling me about her life and the life lessons that she had. And then there were people who would even be like, I'm going to come and I'm going to take you out. And she was just so strong and so confident in how she presented herself that even when people would threaten her, like literally threaten her livelihood, she was like, I'm going to be all right. And I'm not going to go until I want to go. And just Black women, I'm just always in awe with them. All the books that I talked about today, there's a lot of Black women in there. And these Black women are just like, you're not going to punk me, babes. I'm going to do what I want to do. So just hearing about the beginning of her life, middle of her life, the end of her life, and how she lived. And I think even in this book, I mean, don't quote me, but I think in this book, there's also that passage that I said earlier that I don't got to do nothing but be Black and die. And this was that girl. Coming in the number 1 spot, this has been my favorite historical fiction. I can't even tell you how long this has been my favorite historical fiction. But this is Homegoing. Homegoing by Yagazi. This book is similar to W.E.B. Du Bois, the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, And the reason why it's similar is because it's also tracks the descendants of two people. And while reading this book, I just kept thinking to myself, this is wild. Like, every chapter was about a new descendant, right? You keep going and you keep reading about things that happen to them, starting from Africa. It opens up with this kind of war or conflict that happens. And I'm saying conflict lightly because people need to be calling things war instead of saying it's a conflict. That is war. That's genocide. Okay? You follow the characters and their descendants and the things that they're doing, how they're living in America, just different things that are happening to them. And to me, it just reminds me of, there was this girl on TikTok who said sometimes she has a hard time engaging with white people because if she sit there too long and think about the language and the history and the knowledge that was stolen from her, that she will never have access to, that was lost throughout her family line, it'll make her crash out. This is the example of that. This is a literal embodiment of that. And I think if I say anything too much, it will spoil, but this is the best historical fiction I've ever read. I cried. I felt so seen. I felt like finally there is a book that talks about how generation after generation after generation, the effects of chattel slavery and colonialization remains within the storyline, remains within the family history, and how there was points of the story where, you know, some family members were like trying to figure out like who they are, if they're gonna return, like things like, there was just so many things wrapped up in this story. And I don't even know how Yagazi was able to write so many characters who were so different from each other but also share that familiar link. It was beautifully done. I don't have any critiques and no notes. This is the best historical fiction that I've ever read, and I implore you to read it as well. There you have it. Those are 10 historical fiction books that I love down. I can't wait to add them to my collection. Like I said, number 10 is the only one that I rated the lowest, but I felt like I had to include it because I think the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois is it's important to read that. It's important to understand that, but it's a very must read for African Americans, but it can be a hard read as well. So with that being said, thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye.